Good afternoon to everybody. Parshat Re'eh, we want to thank Miriam Bracha Heimler for sponsoring this video. And I think the content of the video is very apt to her, what she's gone through in her life. And Miriam's sponsoring it because this is the 27th year of Aliyah. May you, Miriam, always have a constant Aliyah, a constant ascent and going from Madrega to a higher Madrega. And her Aliyah, the actual anniversary, is the Rosh Chodesh Elul. And secondly, Miriam Bracha and Ruben Lewis, they've decided to also sponsor this Dvar Torah, that it should be for the zchut of their late friend. We all knew, member of Akahila, great Baal Korei, Raphael Katz, Zecher Tzadik Libracha. So this is for these two reasons. This Dvar Torah has been mukdash. After listing in Parshat Re'eh, after listing 8 types of sorcery, which the nations of the world at the time of Moshe and Joshua engaged in Eretz Israel, and part of those sorcery practices was magic and witchcraft, etc., was that to reveal what the future was. So then the Torah says, when you come into Eretz Israel, so don't resort to those practices, but what you have to be is Tamim B'Hashem L'Hashem Elokecha. You have to be, the word Tamim means sometimes innocent, the Tamim means like whole. You have to be whole with Hashem. Well, in a moment, we'll just explain what it means to be whole with Hashem. But in other words, you must just accept what Hashem has dished out to you in life, and don't try to explore too much. What does Hashem? What do the future hold for you? That's what the pasuk is. And now, just before we carry on, the Ramban Nachmanides, in an essay in Torat Hashem Tmima, some people say it was the last essay or the last drosha that he gave in Spain before he was banished because he won an argument against a Jew, apostate Jew, who argued about Christianity, etc. But anyway, he was banished, and then he went on Aliyah to Eretz Israel. Some people say this drasha, Torah Hashem Temima, that the word of Hashem, the Torah of Hashem is complete, was his last drasha in Shul. Very long drasha. To get back to the point, in that work, which afterwards was written, Torah Hashem Temima, the Ramban says, listen, first of all, we should know that these practices that the Goyim have of consulting and doing certain actions which would result in knowing the future, the Ramban says, well, it's not something which is just bobomaises, like the Ibn Ezra says. The Ibn Ezra was asked if everything is, it must be, he says that someone told the Ibn Ezra, someone said to him, there must be some sort of truth in these practices, because if there was no truth in these practices, if it wasn't effective at all, so why would Hashem then prohibit it? So he said exactly the opposite. He says because the Torah is not going to prohibit something which got a bit of truth to it, but the Torah is going to prohibit something which is totally false. Anyway, to get back to the point now, the Ramban's opinion, on the other hand, is these practices which the Goyim delved into, which was like a mix of magic, etc., that they do have some certain effect, and they do, in fact, are able to tell what holds for the future. So why then, according to the Ramban, there's a couple of questions now. Why, according to the Ramban, is this forbidden? If you're saying that the Ramban says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu allowed the Goyim to do these practices, because he says very forcefully and so interestingly, the Ramban says every single person has got a desire to know his future. to know the future. So what is wrong with knowing the future? And the Ramban says it's a legitimate human need that people want. And therefore Hashem said that for the Goyim, they're allowed to indulge in these practices, but not the Jews. But if this is something which is so natural to the human conditions, so why is it asur? So the Ramban, he says a very, very far-reaching principle. He says, yes, it is effective, but it's not totally effective. And in the Psukim it says that when you come to Eretz Yisrael and you see these people who are practicing these forms of witchcraft, in order to know seances, etc., in order to know what the future holds, don't practice like them, because what you do is you've got Nevi'im. You don't have to go to those sorcerers. You've got prophets, and the prophets will tell you what the future holds. So just to sharpen the Ramban says, yes, the Goyim have got an effective way, a method of knowing the future, but that method is not foolproof. What it does is it's got a lot of mistakes. It's very inaccurate. It has got some sort of effect, but it's not, as I say, something that's so trustworthy. But on the other hand, when you ask a Nabi, right, about what's going on, so that's 100% foolproof. And therefore, what you have to do is ask the Nabi. But how now? Let's go now to the next stage. I mean, if that is so, what does it mean, Tamim tiyeh im Hashem Elokecha? I mean, what did the Pasuk says? The Pasuk says, you come to Eretz Yisrael, don't do like the practices of the nations of the world who resort to witchcraft to know the future. You must be Tamim, whole with Hashem. In other words, accept whatever Hashem is telling you, and don't now try to find out what the future holds, but go rather to a Nabi. But I mean, isn't that the fact that you go to a Nabi, isn't that also not being Tamim im Hashem Elokecha? That's what the Sfat Emet asks. And the Sfat Emet answers is, you know what the big difference is? Besides what I said before, that the difference is the one's only partially correct and the other one's not partially is totally correct, but there's a fundamental difference. And that is the sorcerer thinks that there's only the forces of natural forces. And the person who goes to Nabi and he asks a Nabi, he knows that in the end, everything's up to Hashem. Even what the Nabi is relaying to us is the will of Hashem. And in fact, because it's the will of Hashem, so we know now that the Nabi can say something and things can't happen. For example, you can say that this is there's going to be something which is ominous, which is going to happen, something bad, and yet afterwards the Torah, something that won't happen. Why? Because the people did tshuva. So, B'kitzur, that's what it means then, according to the Ramban. What does it mean? Tamim tiyeh Hashem Elokecha. Tamim tiyeh is that you're wholehearted with Hashem, because you know that even the Nabi, when he gives you something, it's not tandui on nature, but on Hashem's word. Let's conclude with what the Ramban himself says, that what is this got to do? What does it mean that when we don't want to involve ourselves in the horoscopes or witchcrafts, etc.? Why is that called wholeness? Why is that called tmimut? The word tamim means whole. So Ramban explains as follows. He says, if a person would consult in these forces or these type of people, his commitment to God would not be whole. It would be fragmented. What it means is that he keeps certain halachot, he keeps certain practices, but when it comes to the crux and he's under pressure, where does he run to? He runs to the horoscopes, he runs to the sorcerers, he runs to the witches in order to know what will happen. That's called, and it's not only in this area, but that's called not being tamim. Tamim is that in all areas I am committed to Hashem, but not that in this area I'm committed to Hashem. But then when the things get really tough, I go and find the solution somewhere else. That's not tmimut. That's not wholeness. That's a fragmented commitment to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Can I end off with a matter of halacha? And that is, we all know that in the Shulchan Aruch it says part of being tamim and not knowing the future is that we don't seek out what the stars say, we don't look at the horoscopes, But also it says that we don't resort to lotteries. What does that mean? There was a practice. We all know that something is, one of the practices is called the lottery of the Gra. We take, let's say, a Tanakh, we open it up in a certain way, 7 times, in 7 chapters, in 7 pages, 7 pasuk, etc., etc. And what comes out randomly, that is the answer to the problem that we do. So in the Shulchan Aruch it says, you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to open up a Torah and get advice from the Torah in a random way, which is lottery. You say, I'm just going to flip over and I'm going to point my finger to this pasuk, and that pasuk is going to indicate to me what's going to be. But it's interesting, in one of the tshuvot, one of the responsa, Elif Lecha Shlomo, what he says is like this: yeah, you're not allowed to do it to know the future, but in his opinion, if I'm trying to know, should I do A or B? I'm not trying to know what the future is. I've got 2 paths ahead of me, and I don't know which one's better. It's got nothing to do with the future. I want to do that which is perfect, so then I'm entitled to get an eitzah, some sort of advice from the Torah by having a lottery. But if I'm using the lottery to determine what my future will be, that is asur. So b'kitzur, what we learn from Tamim Tiyem Hashem Elokecha, to be whole with Hashem is to be whole in one's commitment. And therefore one doesn't seek solutions and what the future will be outside of Hashem. One is allowed to go to a prophet. On the other hand, people, the nations of the world who want to relate to horoscopes, like, for example, Nancy Reagan and her husband, so then, okay, we can laugh about it if we want to, but it's not asur. It's not asur. They're entitled to do it. But with us, we've got a different chelek with Hashem. So Shabbat Shalom lekulchem. And Erev Rosh Chodesh, almost Rosh Chodesh Elul, that we should all have a good month. Kol tov.